Brilliance Audio.
Bell, Book, and Key by Rysa Walker. Performed by Kate Rudd and Eric G. Dove. Tyson, Little Rest, Rhode Island, May 18th, 1780. The proprietor of the Little Rest Inn slides a large copper mug of cider and a shallow wooden plate in front of me. He places a second, considerably smaller mug in front of Cleo and says he'll return shortly with her food. Cleo tosses back most of her cider as soon as it hits the table. I do the same. The closest stable point was several blocks away, and it's unseasonably warm for late spring in New England. A passing carriage raised a cloud of dust just before we reached the inn, and while we managed to get most of it off in our room before coming back down to the tavern, my throat still feels like I've been eating sand. "Now we know why he charges half price for women's room and board," Cleo says, giving the tiny mug a foul look. The innkeeper returns with a plate of something called pandowdy. It looks good, smells good too, with hints of apples and cinnamon. I stare down at the massive blob of cold pastry in the center of my own plate. It's pork pie, apparently. Something I ordered only because I recognized the words pork and pie on the bill of fare posted behind the bar, and it sounded less gross than boiled fish or calf's head soup. I have no idea what the other option, cock-a-leeky, even is, but I know I'm not eating it. "Are you certain your missus wouldn't rather take her meal into the ladies' parlor?" the innkeeper says, still holding Cleo's plate. It's the third time he's asked this. We seem to be violating some sort of norm, which is something I'd prefer to avoid when jumping to a strange time and place. But we wouldn't be able to see the dining room from the windowless, oversized closet he showed us when we checked in a few minutes earlier. And splitting up worries me more than offending this guy's sensibilities. "We thank thee for the kind offer," I say, "but this table will do nicely. My wife likes having a view." "Good thing your wife's not particular," the man says with a snort as he heads back to the bar. "'Tain't much of a view." He has a point.
Madi, Bethesda, Maryland, November 27th, 2136. My garden is missing. The willow is still in the backyard. So is the patio, the shed, and the large oak. But those are all inside the boundary of the CHRONOS field protecting the house, so they don't really change. The trees and grass seem to fare better in some timelines than others, depending on whether there are high-rise buildings on the other side of our fence. But they've never entirely vanished. My tiny garden, however, is outside the protective boundary. And it's gone. The seedlings I planted are gone too, along with the portable greenhouse I placed over them. All that remains is the slightly raised patch of earth about 3 meters long that suggested someone else had once had a garden here. That's why I chose the spot originally, thinking the ground might be more tillable. This, of course, begs the question of whether the other items planted there are also gone. And since one of those items set in motion the insanity of the past several weeks, I have to know. In the grand scheme of things, the garden is no great loss. I planted it mostly as a stalling tactic to avoid working on my thesis, but also because the weather was nice, and I'd been thinking about the garden my father and I created on the roof of our townhouse in London when I was 7 or 8. In terms of yield, our urban garden was a disappointment. A handful of strawberries, a few anemic-looking aubergines, and enough cucumbers and lettuce for one decent-sized salad. The only things that grew well were tomatoes and sage, neither of which I was particularly fond as a child. But we'd enjoyed planting it together, enjoyed the expectation of our meager crop. I think planting the garden here a few weeks back, smelling the soil and feeling it against my bare hands, was my way of trying to hold on to that place in my soul where my dad was still alive. Thinking of him was what reminded me that I hadn't checked on the garden since the timeline shifted back. My father was my touchstone, the person I turned to when life didn't make sense, when I made mistakes, when I needed advice. He had an uncanny knack for helping me see the bright side, even when I believed my entire world was shot to hell. His optimism is something I could use right now. This reality is, admittedly, better than the last, which was brought to us courtesy of tourists from Timeline 27V, who were intent on using our timeline as their personal game board. Pearl Harbor never happened. The U.S. never entered World War II, and a slow, creeping fascism spread across the nation. Jack was stuck in the 1960s, and my paternal grandmother, Nora, the only family member who comes even close to understanding me the way Dad did, was erased.